Da, 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 da.
Da, 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 da. Welcome back to Jesus is Coming Soon with Mike Shaw. I'm Mike Shaw. How are you? This is episode 6, kind of a special edition. Joining me is Emilee Danielson, our CEO of Fresh Road Media.
Yeah. I guess I'm kind of responsible for that whole thing.
You are responsible, yes. Yeah, so it's always get a little nervous when you're interviewing the boss, but I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, don't think of me as the boss.
Okay.
Just think of me as me.
How do you like Bruce Springsteen?
Yeah, exactly, right? Not a big fan, but, you know.
I can relate to that. Some of his songs are okay.
A couple of his songs are very good, very anthem-esque, but
You know the Laura Ingraham Shut Up and Sing thing?
No,
She wrote a book, Shut Up and Sing.
Okay.
It's like all these woke artists.
Yeah, and
we love your music.
Yeah.
Just please don't get politically involved.
Exactly. Who was it? Somebody just very recently came out, Kurt Russell, and just kind of said, you know what, just
shut up and
let it go. If you're yeah, exactly. Kind of the same thing. I think he said it more tactfully, but so
exactly.
That's good. Yeah, just do what you do. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here on episode 6.
My pleasure.
I have no idea what I'm going to ask you or what we're going to talk about. It'll just be free form.
All right. I can always talk about my grandkids.
That's what we do.
I know that everyone would love to hear about my grandkids.
Did you bring a slideshow?
I do. I could get one together really quick. No, I'm just kidding.
When the neighbors go on vacation, they come back in the old days. They come back with a bunch of slides.
They did, or like an album that then everybody looked at
and fell asleep. It was great. Yeah, it was fantastic. Well, I do want to talk about Fresh Road because that's a big part of what we're doing.
It is.
But I really want to know more about you and your history and you and Chris and how that intersects with my life and kind of let people in a little bit behind the scenes on how all this came together. So let's start back in the beginning.
Okay.
So, Chris is 40 plus years broadcast experience, mostly radio, but he's done a few movies and you've helped him write those.
He is really good at what he does, telling stories and engaging with people and even just different platforms, because it doesn't always translate. Like you can be a very good writer, which Chris has authored a couple books, and that doesn't necessarily translate into a good interview or, a good stage presence or whatever. But Chris is kind of one of those Renaissance men where he just is able to do it. It's God's gifting, and it's been really exciting. Yeah.
I've known Chris for a long time now. We'll get into that, but he is one smart dude. I'm serious. He's got lots of talents.
And cute, if I do say so myself.
It's weird. I didn't notice that so much. I don't know.
Anyway.
Okay. So my question is, how did he rope you into this? When did you start on the radio, or what was your first?
That started back when our kids were young. They were still in school. And Chris had always said, you have a big market voice. You have a big market voice. I want to use your voice. And he had been in radio for years. And finally, we were working in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. And he said, Emilee, I really want you to cut some ads for me. And so I thought, okay, I'll do that. And it was really fun because Chris and I would go in the studio together. He would write out everything he wanted me to say. He has a really good ear, so he'd tell me, be more lighthearted, or you sound too sing-songy, or whatever. And it was really fun. We put a couple commercials together, and Chris actually won awards for those commercials. I don't remember what the name of the award was.
Those are your awards, too,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But LiftMaster Garage Door Opener, that was one of them that we did. It was just really fun. Well, Chris, being in radio, he's like, I want you to be in radio too, Emilee, because I think that's your gifting. Or just speaking is your gifting. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, but
he's not wrong.
Here's the thing about radio. Yeah. And Chris has said this 100 times before. It's hard to get into radio unless you're already in radio.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a catch-22. Well, an opportunity opened up for us in a remote little village in Western Alaska.
But as missionaries.
Right. Because, we got to the point where it's like, if the work that we're doing isn't putting the kingdom forward, it just, for us anyway, became very empty and shallow. But I mean, everybody has their place. And Chris, obviously, as you can attest, was really called to ministry as well.
Yeah.
And so we got that opportunity finally in Alaska. Yeah. And he put me on the air doing shows, and it was not easy because there was pressure, and I'm not a ta-da person, let me be in front of everybody and do things. Right. I love being behind the scenes. If I don't need to talk to people or, I'm just a behind the scenes person.
Yeah.
But it was even harder just given that you have to talk about the Naknek River, the Nushagak River, the Igigik River, and these words, the names of villages, the names of people, they were not easy.
Yeah.
And
is that the Inuit language?
It was
another tribe?
Yes, it was Inuit, and then there was, it was kind of a unique area where the Athabaskan Indians, I believe it was the Inuit Eskimos, and then the people that lived along the chain. Those three distinct people groups met. It all merged in Naknek, Alaska.
How cool is that?
It was really a great, great experience. It was where I got my feet wet in really doing professional radio.
You guys did a show like every morning, right?
We did a morning show. We even had our kids involved because, as you know, on the mission field, the work is plenty, but the workers are few.
Right.
But that was a really great upbringing for our kids as well.
Yeah.
And that's where I just kind of got my sea legs. And then from there, we went from Naknek, Alaska. We went to Phoenix, Arizona, which is where we met you.
Where we met,
and that was just a really pivotal time in our life. We were introduced to so many people who are still a part of our lives today.
Sam, yep.
And ministry, those people that find ministry and being co-laborers, even if you're co-laborers for a little while and you go off and you do separate things, there's still that bond. Yep. You still come back together on occasion, and it's just a beautiful thing.
I always say you meet the nicest people at Christian radio stations.
Right? You really do. That's really a good mantra.
Just a lot of heart for ministry at Family Life Radio, and just a lot of good friends still there.
And then you connect with other radio stations as well.
Sure.
There's one up in Pequot Lakes, Minnesota that we got connected with. Will always be, Pequot Lakes. Kazoo tight.
That's a whole other language. How many languages do you speak?
And, of course, the radio station out in Alaska and then Arizona and just all around. We actually, even Chris and I got an opportunity to go to England because our grandkids were over there. So we would visit England often.
Nice.
Our daughter and son-in-law were in the Air Force. And we connected with a radio station in Coventry, England, which was really an interesting...
Like a Christian station?
Well, it was a Christian station, but over there they don't refer to it as a Christian station. They refer to it as like a community station.
Okay.
And so it's definitely got, the Christian overtones. They're playing Christian music.
Yeah.
But they don't have that concentrated Christian music, Christian movies, Christian labeled things over there like we do. It's still blended. It's still very blended.
It's like our Christian roots, a lot of them go back to England.
Exactly.
And Europe.
Yep.
And then it moved here, the United States, as a church plant.
Yep.
And then Christianity proceeded to die out. In England.
It did.
And it's so encouraging to hear that there's still an influence and it's still on.
There really is. And it was interesting because we were there during Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday. Whoa. So they actually brought us on the air. They wanted to get the American perspective of the royal family and the Queen and everything. And of course, I think most people, especially since Lady Di, find it fascinating.
Yeah.
So we were going to go on for like 15 minutes and just talk to him about it, but we were on air for like over an hour with him.
Oh, that's cool.
It was wonderful just meeting the Christians over there. And like you said, you meet the nicest people in Christian radio.
So wait a minute. Chris and another guy on the radio went longer than 15 minutes? I'm shocked.
Surprise.
I'm so surprised by that.
So radio has always been, and I think, even converting that now as things are going more online, it's always been a really great venue to share the gospel, to connect with people, and really encourage one another, even though you can't necessarily pinpoint or touch or see the person that you're talking to. It's still a great way to encourage and impact the body.
It's amazing, also working at Family Life Radio and starting in Odessa, Texas with Mary Jo, and it was just the two of us running the whole station.
Okay.
And, I did the morning show. She joined me a lot. And she would send me a message. Years later, she sent me a message that she was out doing something. She ran into someone who recognized her.
Oh, okay.
And said, you and Mike got saved because of you and Mike. Because, wow. Things like that just blow your mind.
They really do. Every once in a while, God will give you a glimpse into what He's doing through you.
Right.
He doesn't always do that. But every once in a while, He does. And it's just like wind in your sail. And it keeps you going.
Because it's not us. It's the gifts that God gives us and the places that He sends us.
Exactly.
And then the Holy Spirit does the rest. I mean, we can't take credit. But
just being obedient.
Yeah. Just being obedient. And so then you're in Phoenix, and then they move you down to Tucson.
Yep.
The way Family Life Radio worked at the time, I think we were in 12 states. I think they're in 13 now, maybe more.
Yep.
But 12 states at the time. And so there were kind of regional morning shows.
Right.
So you guys went from the Phoenix area to all of Arizona.
Correct. Yep.
And it was a huge hit.
Yeah, it was. I think a lot of it was just like the right timing. Yeah. You know what I mean? I think Caleb kind of paved the way to make it a legitimate force, Christian radio specific.
Yeah.
And it was great because, Caleb or whatever radio station has their place. But what we found was just that Arizona specific family that you could connect with. Right. And yet they had radio stations up in Michigan and throughout the United States. Yep. But still having people there that could connect with the audience, that could meet people face to face. And it's hard to imagine, but real ministry does take place over the airwaves. It really does.
Well, even back in the Family Life Radio days, and this was true, and we all heard it from listeners, that God would play a specific song that would hit a specific person in just the right way to encourage them in whatever they were going through.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing.
It is. Yeah. People connect with people.
Right.
They really do.
Yeah. So that's an amazing time. So, the three of us became fast friends.
We did. We had you on the show with us. We had you just join us. Yep. You were the news guy.
Right.
And so you would do top of the hour stuff and everything. But we just connected so much. So Chris is like, bring Mike in the studio with us. Yeah. The more the merrier has always been our mantra. And it was really fun. And then Joel, our producer, that just made such a great team. There was a dynamic there that you couldn't deny. Really great memories. Yeah. And every once in a while when God puts very specific people in very specific places and you have a dynamic where you just know that for the time being anyway, you're banging on all cylinders. Yep. It is so fun. It makes the work light. Yeah. It really does.
And then it confirmed, what Chris was saying, your big market voice, your talent, because, Knack is not such a big market.
No.
It's probably not even a ranked market.
Right.
If those of you not in radio or TV, the markets are ranked by market size.
Right, yeah.
But you get to Phoenix, all of a sudden you're top 10.
Yeah.
Or the state of Arizona.
Talking to hundreds of thousands of people.
Right, yeah.
I don't remember what we were doing. We were doing some bit on the air, and we had so many calls that morning that it broke the system, the exchange. Yeah. And so it was just, there's always problems, there's always issues, and that's what makes me nervous. But that's why we have a team of people, everybody doing their thing.
No such thing as a perfect job. You get to talk for a living. People see you. It's like, I could do that. It's so easy to talk for a living. And you're right, you could.
Yeah.
But there's like any other job. There's things you have to deal with.
It gets hard. Well, and Chris has a saying, You can do a show for a day. You can probably even do a show for a week. Yeah. Most people probably could, but can you do it for a year? Yeah. Every single day.
No matter how you feel, no matter what your mood, no matter what you're going through.
Yeah.
But you guys made an art out of sharing what you're going through, and that was a part of the ministry.
Yeah, it really, we try to just be really authentic and just... Here it is. You can try being something you're not, but that only lasts so long.
Right.
And so we just found it was better to just be honest and open. And when you do that, you're vulnerable. And guess what? Some people are not going to like you. And you got to just deal with that and be okay with that.
That's the nature of the business. Some people are going to love you. Some people are not going to like you.
Some people are going to love you, and then you say one thing, and then they don't like you anymore. So it has, that whole being in radio, being very high profile, has really helped me to, you cannot find your significance in those people. You cannot find your significance in the approval of the people around you.
Right.
You have to know who you are.
Yep.
And knowing who you are in Jesus is key.
Yes, huge.
But know who you are and be secure in that.
Yeah.
And so that I learned so much.
Right.
I learned so much.
Whether you're in secular radio or Christian radio, whether you're saved or not saved, when you're on radio, on TV, in a movie, all of a sudden you become a public figure.
Right.
And it can be annoying when people complain. It's like, well, how would you like it if I came down to the shop and criticized you changing tires? But you can't do that because it's part of it.
It is. It comes with the territory.
It comes with the territory. It's part of it.
Yep. And we had a rule, 60%. If 60% are fine with you, you have won the day.
That's right.
And to the depths that someone's going to not like you, is the same as the depths to which those other people love you.
Yeah.
So you have to focus on the people that are with you. You have to focus on the people that you are connecting with, because those are the people God is giving you to minister to and encourage. And so, again, that's another hard thing that you just had to learn. It was so easy. You'd get done with the show. You'd think it was a really good show. And then you'd get an email, that said, Chris and Emilee, I just want to tell you this in love. You stink. You're really rotten at what you do. I barely even believe you're actually Christians. In Jesus.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
But you have to drop it and walk on. And that has served us well long term.
Well, especially now, fast forwarding, skipping ahead, we'll go back and pick up the story after Family Life. But now with social media.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So anybody can have a YouTube channel. Anybody can have a podcast. We're living proof. and so that's the rule. Find your audience. In other words,
your tribe.
Be you. Your audience will find you.
Yeah, exactly.
And the detractors, take the view, because if they're complaining, you get someone watched your video. Thank you for watching.
Yep, exactly.
And you just water off your back and you concentrate on your people.
Yeah, and it is a constant, ongoing thing. But I think it kind of is for everybody.
Yeah,
you have to focus on what you're called to do, and it doesn't matter whether you've been called to be very high profile, or you've been called to try to break through the clutter of social media, or you've been called to manage that grocery store, or you've been called to teach that really tough classroom, whatever. It's the same. The rule is the same. Remember who you are, know what God has called you to do, and just focus on that, and don't let those distractions be distractions, because that's all they are, is distractions.
And you have confidence in who God has made you, the assignment that He's giving you, and you just be faithful to that. And I am very convinced, and Chris is the pastor. We're inside the boardroom here at Fresh Encounter Church, and Chris is the pastor, and he actually let me preach a couple of times. And one of the times I preached, I was like, I am fully convinced that, I did the parable of the talents.
Yes, I remember
and,
that.
I'm just fully convinced that, what people think is the most important jobs in the kingdom, God is looking at the faithfulness, no matter what the job is in the kingdom.
Yep.
And so there's going to be a lot more janitors that are going to speak well done, good and faithful sermon, as opposed to people that are in the front with big mouths in the kingdom.
I mean, I just look at motherhood and how, as I was raising my kids, you know, people around me were telling me that's your most important job. That's your ministry.
Yep.
And I believed that and I approached it like that. But now that that portion of my life is over, I look back and I still wish I would have taken that even more to heart and embraced it even more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard, but you have to bloom where you're planted. And I think once you are able to do that, once you are able to bloom where you're planted, that's when then your territory will expand.
Yep.
That's, you know, after those years of faithfulness.
Yeah.
Because, you look at the stories in the Bible, that's what God's looking for over and over and over and over again in the little things before they were king, before they were, you know, whatever important role they served. God was looking for faithfulness in the small, ordinary, mundane stuff. Because that is hard. It is hard.
Chris gave a wonderful sermon a couple weeks ago, and you can find it at Bible Idiots at freshroadmedia.com, where he was talking about growing up and out of your cave.
Yes.
And talking about how those hard times that David went through, and there are parallels in all of our lives. The hard times that we go through, God is training us for the calling he has on our lives. So, and we've all been through that, and there may be more to come. I don't know. I don't know how much more training I want.
I think we can promise you all that. There's more of that to come.
There's more of that to come.
Guaranteed. I wish it was different. If I was God, I'd make it different, but that's why I'm not God. We've heard it before where we grow through the tough stuff. And God says, I discipline those that I love. And it never feels good at the time. It never does. But he is growing us. He's toughening us. He's preparing us. And then I think those things that he allows us to go through, as difficult as they are, and they are, how much more glorious will heaven be? How much more glorious will it be to just simply be in his presence after we've been through all of this? And so we need to really count it as privilege. We need to count it as joy when we go through those trials, when we go through those difficulties. And that, of course, is why it's so important, however you do it, whether it's face-to-face, in your family, at your work, with your friends, at your church, on social media. Encourage one another.
We get
encourage one another.
Yes, it's true.
So
we do. And something I learned when my mom passed away 3 years ago, and that was a really difficult time. Right on top, she died the day before the lockdowns for COVID, and the whole dynamic, and it's a much longer story. But through being there to be with her, as you know, I got to help her, escort her to heaven, I guess, as
walk her home.
You kind of walk her home in a way. And you know, God told me before I went that he was going to bless me, and this is a huge blessing, which is God has us.
He does.
Even in death, even in sickness and death.
Yeah, he does.
He has us. My mom is more alive now than she's ever been, and I got to see that transition. And it made it even more real to me that where we're going is real.
It is,
And then this has been more of a revelation lately because of all the junk that's going on in the world right now. I almost said the C word, C-R-A-V word. So all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, it's like, wait a minute. I am God's forever. Thanks to his son, Jesus. No one can ever change that. And so I can be bold and I can have peace.
Yeah, you can. And just because you're going through something that is really difficult, because I tend to do this, I tend to, not another thing. Or why me? Or, you know, really, God? Like, when are you going to let up? But he's got us, and it's another opportunity for us to trust him.
Yes.
Just a quick story. My sister is recovering right now from cancer in her mouth, which is like a drinker's, smoker's cancer. And she's not a drinker or a smoker.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know what that is, but it doesn't matter. She really was like, I don't want to go through this.
Yeah.
Because it was very dramatic. They had to take out about a third of her jaw.
Oh my gosh.
They then took bone from another place and grafted that in.
Wow.
So it's been a long process, a long road home. But before she was even diagnosed, she called me one day and she said, I just sensed the Lord's telling me to sell my house. And I said, really? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? And she's like, I don't know. I kind of feel like God's wanting me to do that, but he's not telling me why or where I'm supposed to go.
Like Abraham.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember listening to her tell the story, and I just thought to myself, would I be willing to sell my home? That's kind of a thing. Am I messing up my mic there?
We'll find out when I edit.
But I just thought, would I be willing to sell my house?
Yeah.
So she's kind of looking around for homes. She didn't really see anything. She didn't even know what city she was going to want to live in. Her two kids were grown. They were in neighboring towns. So anyway, her son said, hey, Mom, you know what? Go ahead, sell your house. Come live with us for a few months until you figure out where you want to go, what you want to do, what God's leading you to. She said, okay. So she did. She sold her house. Mm-hmm. She moved in with her son and daughter-in-law and her grandson. How awesome is that?
That's pretty fun.
And it was about 60 days later.
Yeah.
She was having trouble, and shortly after that, diagnosed. And then, of course, she finally got to the point where they did the surgery, and she could not just go home and live by herself. But it was like God knew.
Yeah.
God knew that this was ahead of her.
Yeah.
And he prepared her, and in her obedience, she was, because she can't work for like a year.
Oh, gosh.
And so she's living with her son. Everything's fine. She didn't lose her house because God prompted her ahead of time. You need to sell your house, and I'll show you. I'm not going to tell you this horrible thing that you're going to go through,
right?
But you're going to go through it. And I tell you what, when we were in the hospital, her children are believers.
Yeah.
She's a believer.
Yeah.
And her good friend, her best friend in life, is a believer. And just as we moved and stayed for that week in that hospital, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, I know that people saw her faith, heard about the goodness of God, and there was a testimony there.
Right.
And so now she's recovering. She has said many times, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but I would do it again if God's power is demonstrated.
Yeah.
God's power is demonstrated.
What a heart.
And so, it was really amazing to see her go through it with a tremendous amount of grace and a tremendous amount of strength.
Yeah.
And we both know, she'll be the first to admit, that is the grace and the strength that only God can give us.
Yeah.
That is not in and of ourselves.
And just a few weeks ago, I was over at the house, and I've never heard anyone scream for the Vikings like your sister does. My goodness, people.
Yeah, she's talking again now. So
she's got her Viking mojo
She
back.
loves her Vikings. She really does. So that was fun.
Yeah,
it was really fun. Yeah.
No doubt. All right. So when we last left our heroes, they were in Tucson, Arizona. I have now become a friend. I come over to the house. We play Wii. I guess there's a Wii.
Honorary member of the family,
honorary member of the family at the time. My mantra then was, I want to be an honorary Danielson, which I have achieved now that I've moved here in Iowa. Your dogs love me like a family member.
They do.
That was confirmation.
Wanting to be an honorary Danielson is really funny when you get to know the Danielson.
Yes, that's true. That's true. That's part of the charm.
Nobody really wants to be an honorary.
Part of the charm. I love adventure. Let me just say.
There you go. So never a dull moment in the Danielson home. Yeah.
So I left Family Life Radio before you guys did.
Yeah, you did.
Back in 2009. I went on to do Tea Party videos and got into politics and all of that. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
And then you guys, how long did you stay, and then where did you go?
Okay, so we were with Family Life Radio. I don't even remember the year, but we left, and shortly after that, we moved to Michigan.
Okay.
Where we were with a much smaller radio station in southern Michigan, and we were there for several years. Probably the longest we've ever been anywhere.
Okay.
Was right there. And we just kind of repeated the same thing, was that we had a lot of fun. We have a lot of lifelong friends from there. Yep. The ministry that took place, so much goodness of God. I mean, you interviewed Gomison,
yep.
Andrew Gomison, and that's a lifelong friend that we have from Michigan.
Oh, nice. That was episode 5.
Yeah, he wrote a book, and we were just so impressed with his faith. Chris said, we got to bring him on the show. Yeah. And of course, he's a paraplegic. Yep. And cerebral palsy. And so he does, speech is not an easy thing for him.
He's gotten so much better.
Yes, he really has, because Chris said, that guy's got something to say, and it's worth saying. Yeah. So he brought him on air. Some of the people were like, at the station were like, right. Yep, but Chris worked with him and had faith in him and pushed him. Yeah. And now he's got his own podcast and stuff like that. And he's phenomenal. Yeah. He is phenomenal. Chris saw it. Chris saw the potential. Chris saw the gifting. Chris saw the calling. Yeah. And he just did what other people said, you probably shouldn't do that. It's like, no, we're going to do that.
Yeah, so. And I've got to know him now because he was on your show earlier in the year. And so I'm like, Andrew, come online. And we had a great visit in episode 5. Which kind of launched off of the great visit you guys had with him. Yeah. I don't remember what the episode
I don't remember either.
But it's all at freshwoodmedia.com.
Yes,
freshwoodmedia.com.
Go there. There's lots of great stuff.
Yeah. Right. After Michigan, and I know this because I know you guys, after Michigan comes Alabama.
Alabama, correct.
Sweet home Alabama.
We went to Alabama, and that was probably one of my favorite places to live.
Yeah.
You're in the South, and of course, there's just that Southern charm. People in the South are very open. I mean, we would go to an event and sit by complete strangers.
Oh, yeah.
And, right? Not for long. And, they start giving you contact information of people that they know, and it's kind of like, are you sure? Because in the North, don't you ever give anyone contact information
I don't trust you yet
without me knowing about it. Yeah. But they were just very open. I loved living in the South. The food. The food. The fried chicken, the barbecue.
My dad's from Mississippi. So Mama and Papa.
Yes.
Mama used to make a caramel cake.
And
so... the cake was great, and then the frosting is caramelized sugar.
I know,
you
right?
Take a blowtorch to cut it, but then once you did, it's it's not very good for you, but boy, was it good.
Oh, yeah. And there was a video one time that I watched that these children in British schools over in England were introduced to Southern cooking. So they were given the biscuits and the sausage gravies, biscuits and gravy, and the sweet tea. Yeah. And
grits?
No, they might have. Maybe that was a different one. I think they did several different, a few different episodes.
Peach cobbler.
But to watch these boys go from what is that to oh my goodness, this is so amazing. Was really, really fun to watch. And, the British boy, they're just so proper,
Right.
And so, there's something about that Southern food that's so good.
So it's not the same, but if they open some Cracker Barrels in England, that might help. Cracker Barrel's pretty good.
But you got to do McEwen grits.
Yeah.
Oh, McEwen grits actually worked for them for a while. They're very good friends of ours.
Wow.
Man, the grits you get at some of those restaurants, not the same thing.
Okay.
If you want real Southern grits,
now we know.
The way Southern grits are supposed to be.
The McEwens.
McEwen grits.
Sounds like a nice Irish name.
I have them in my cupboard.
Okay.
I have to order them and get them shipped because I miss Southern grits.
Well, I'm part of the carnivore cult now, so I'm not eating carbs, but I do enjoy my ribeyes every day.
I'm really sorry you can't have grits. Right? Yeah. Loaded with butter.
Yeah, so sometimes I question my choices in life. You're not wrong about that. All right.
Anyway,
so now this brings me to the fun part because, and I don't know where along that way, because I know Chris is seminary trained, and he's obviously a pastor now, but this is not his first pastorate.
No.
And even, while you guys are doing missionary work in Alaska and things like that, you're appearing in churches, fundraising, all that stuff.
Yep.
When did Chris become a pastor, like his main vocation? And then I'll ask you my really important question.
That's been off and on for 30 some years now, 30 years. When he graduated seminary, or when he finished seminary, he took an associate pastor position that he was at for a while. And then that's when we got into radio, and then Chris got into film.
Okay, and so but pastor came first. I didn't know
pastor came first.
See, that's why we're doing this interview. I'm learning stuff. And so then off and on, he would keep doing like pulpit supply or, an associate pastor, bivocational. Yeah.
As opportunities arose and as he felt called.
Yeah.
Well, we were in Alabama when COVID hit. And at that point, Chris had made 2 movies. I should say Chris and I made 2 movies.
Yeah, that's right.
And
you're in the credits. I've seen it.
And then all of a sudden, COVID hits and content ceases. Nobody's making content and nobody's selling content. Nobody's buying content. And we're going, what are we going to do? And so after the lockdown, Chris said, Emilee, he called me into his office, his home office. He said, I really think God's calling me back into full-time pastoral ministry.
Okay.
And I said, no, please.
Yeah, because if he's called, then you're called.
Yeah, and it's tough. Yeah. I knew how tough it was. Yeah. I know how tough it's going to be.
Sure.
But we just kept praying about it. And
Yeah.
And pretty soon, as soon as I said, fine, Lord,
I give up.
He opened up some doors. We spent a little bit of time in Kansas and then, of course, ultimately ended up in Harlan, Iowa, which has been an answer to prayer.
We're sitting today.
True answer to prayer. And it's been wonderful. It's been glorious.
So I have a saying.
Yeah.
You've probably heard me say it before. Ministry would be great if it wasn't for people. Right. But that's the point. And that's what makes it so rewarding, though.
It does.
Is people.
Yeah, exactly.
So my main question for you, this is what I'm really interested in. What in the world is it like to be the wife of a pastor?
That's a really good question because I'm not a typical pastor's wife. And so everywhere we've gone, and as we go to candidate or whatever, that's one thing that I will tell boards and call committees is that if you think I'm going to come in and play the organ and teach Sunday school, you're sorely mistaken.
Yeah.
I do not fit in that box. And I think that has become acceptable now, where
was that the stereotype?
It was. In fact, when Chris early on, when he first was looking to find a pastorship, we would go and candidate somewhere.
It's kind of like being a first lady, where you're going to change out the china, Nancy Reagan.
Things you got to do.
Right.
And so we would go to different churches, and Chris would preach, and then afterwards they all come and they'd want to meet you and get to know you.
Right.
And like within a sentence or two, I would hear, "Are you the pastor's wife?" "Oh, yes, my name's Emilee." "Do you play piano?" "No, I don't."
Right.
And this would happen every single time.
Were they Baptist churches? Some of them, maybe.
They were a variety of
I'm kidding.
They were a variety of churches. But so finally, I got to the point where people would come up and say, "Oh, are you the pastor's wife?" And I'd say, "Yes, I'm Emilee, and I do not play piano." Let's just get that out there. Don't even ask me. Because it kind of got like discouraging, like, oh, good, I get to tell people how I will not meet their needs again,
I don't think it was a hindrance. Certainly not here.
No. And I think it's become, like I said, those stereotypes have broken down quite a bit just as culture has changed. Right. And Chris has always been very adamant as well to say, you're hiring me, you're not hiring my wife. Yeah. He's always served me so well in that area. And just allowed me to be what God wants me to be. Yeah. And he came to me one time when I had to do some public speaking. And I've always been in the privileged situation where I could pick and choose. That's nice. And if I really kind of felt like, this is a good thing that they have going on, I really want to be a part of it, I would accept that speaking engagement. If it was something kind of goofy, or something I just didn't feel connected to or whatever, I was at liberty to say no. It wasn't like my paycheck or my putting food on the table depended on it. Right. I was thankful for that. Yeah.
And at least at this church is amazing. I've never met so many talented people in one place. It's amazing, my last church in Lubbock was like this. Yeah. But here it's even like to a new degree. Yeah. And so if there's a speaking thing, we got you. Right. Exactly. There's lots of us here that
can, we have a great amount of people that can just minister to one another and serve in capacities that churches in general kind of need. Yeah, yeah. So I was lamenting having to go to this speaking engagement because so many times God calls us to do things that we may not be comfortable doing. Yeah. And I've always been very gifted, like in high school, speech class, I got all A's. My jobs when I first graduated, receptionist, so on, just speaking in front of people. But I always felt so nervous. And I just, when time came to get up in front of people, that was really hard for me. Yeah. When the time came for me to open up the mic on the radio, that was just really, really hard for me.
At first, right?
It still gets that way.
Really?
It still gets that way, but God has a sense of humor. Yeah. It says, you silly little girl, we're going to do this.
That's right.
So I was lamenting, this big presentation that I had to give. And Chris came and he's encouraging me. And sometimes the more someone tries to encourage you, the more irritated you get. You ever been there? Where it's just like, just be quiet. Let me be in my self-loathing. But that's kind of where we were. He was trying to encourage me. And finally I told him, dude, you are not helping me. Just don't say anything to me, And his eyes got real big. And he's like, Emilee, you don't understand. He said, my job as your husband is to help you become everything God wants you to be.
What a great guy.
I know. I didn't like him at the moment for saying that. But it's true. I mean, just like we were talking about Andrew Gomison. Yeah. Same thing for me. He has pushed when I needed to be pushed, encouraged when I needed to be encouraged. He gives me rest when I need rest, where it's like, Emilee, it's fine. You know. But I feel really blessed, really fortunate. He's a very good, I don't know what the word is, where you can just kind of read people. Yeah, and what they need.
Yeah, he's very good at reading people.
He's really good at reading people, and sometimes they need to be encouraged, and sometimes they need to just, their life needs to be softened a little bit. And other times they do kind of need just like a little
smack in the head?
Kick in the pants.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, kick in the pants.
Kick in the pants.
And so it's kind of, Chris likens me. Here's the funny thing. Chris, he describes me like this. He's like, Emilee's like a star player, and every time it's her time to get up to bat, we have to go down in the dugout. We have to drag her out to home plate. We have to put the bat in her hand. And then She hits it out of the park, runs the bases, goes back in the dugout.
Waves at the crowd.
And then when it's her turn again, we have to go down in the dugout, drag her. And that has been how I've really learned to trust God.
Yeah. Okay.
God has a calling on my life. I know that full well. Yeah. He's given me talents I cannot bury. I don't always like it, but when I compare it to some of the people in the Bible and the things that they have had to do, even though they don't like, I don't want to go to Nineveh either. I'm sorry, I'd be on the boat to Tarshish as well.
Yep, throw me overboard, it's me.
Exactly.
I love Jonah.
So I get it. Yeah, I get it. Yeah. And it really is an opportunity to trust God. Trust God. Yeah. And he grows,
He sure does. So in Harlan, you guys get this crazy idea to not go back on the radio, but the 2023 version, which is, hey, let's do a podcast.
Yep.
And let's try to reach people around the country and around the world for Christ and encourage the body of Christ. And, and you guys start that process. And I was sitting in Lubbock, Texas, not enjoying my life at the time. And I get a random call from Chris. I mean, the longer story is I was praying that day because my neighbor used their garbage disposal that backed up into mine. That was part of my living conditions. And I was like, really, Lord?
Yeah.
I'm like, thank you for a place to live, but really?
Yeah.
And then God reminded me at that moment, this was kind of like in the morning. He's like, well, remember in Tucson, and this is after Family Life Friday, remember in Tucson, you were going through some things and you got a random phone call and changed the direction of your life. That night, I got a random phone call from Chris that changed the direction of my life. Yeah. And at the time, we were just talking, filling in for you with the project you were working on.
Yep.
I was going to do it remotely. The more Chris and I ended up talking 2 hours, that turned into come up for a week and visit and see what God is saying and some of the needs that Fresh Road had at the time. Yep. And by March, I moved in.
Yeah.
And we got the band back together.
We really did. And you don't even play piano.
I don't. I did play clarinet.
Did you play clarinet?
5th through 8th grade.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. I played a little bit of clarinet, too.
I don't want to brag or anything, but I was first chair 5th through 8th.
Oh, were you really?
Oh, very exciting.
Nice.
I know you're impressed.
Yeah. Clarinet, like Squidward.
Yeah, something, I don't know. So
you move up here, and sometimes I think about it, even, Mike Shaw is here. Like, it's crazy how life just comes full circle, and God, puts people together for a purpose.
Well, God has blessed me so much through it. I have made so many new friends. I have such a great church family here. My heart is so full. Yeah. And it's just great working with you guys on everything that we're working on with Fresh Road.
Yeah, it is.
And it's part of what I feel like God has called me to.
Yeah.
The Jesus is coming soon. I was supposed to start years ago. I'm convinced.
Right.
And put it off.
You felt called for that.
And didn't do it. Put it off and didn't do it. And apparently I had to move to Harlan for Chris. This is Chris again. For Chris to kind of, and he didn't kick me in the pants, but it was just being around Chris. It's hard not to get some of that energy.
He does energize people, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. but he's a creative, very creative.
Very big creative force.
And he makes things happen. Yep. So that's fun.
And speaking of creative, so your blogs on the freshroadmedia.com.
Yeah.
Really impressed with your writing and the way you do it.
Thank you.
But it's not just, it is the writing, but it's the storytelling that you do to also get across one or more biblical principles in the blog. Have you been doing this your whole life?
I think it was just in radio, particularly when we were in Phoenix. Chris and I just developed this method, I guess, of doing radio where we were going to take any ordinary situation, didn't matter what it was. It could be news of the day. It could have been an event in our life. It could have been anything.
Yeah.
But a real situation, and find the spiritual twist in it. Because there's a spiritual twist in everything.
God's in every aspect of our lives.
He created everything. Yep. He is orchestrating everything. Yep. And so whatever you're looking at, good, bad, or otherwise, what's the spiritual aspect of it? Because there is nowhere that you can go where God isn't.
Yeah.
And so, and so we did that for years and on air. And so working together, being husband and wife, we were so like-minded. We talk about that like we're in the drift, like our minds are almost just like connected sometimes. Yep. If I didn't have something, if I couldn't see something in it, he could, and vice versa. If he didn't really see the spiritual connection, I would find something.
And you guys can refine each other.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yep. And so, I mean, we did it every day, Monday through Friday, for years. Right. And that's why I think I love a true story. You know, looking at the filmmaking that Chris has done, he's done true stories. Right. I love to see movies or read books of true stories because those God is so amazing. We don't really have to make up stories. No. You know what I mean? The real life stories are more amazing than what you can even make up. And in fact, I was excited to come on the podcast and just talk with you because Chris and I, our life has been very unique. Yes. It's been very full. Yep. It's been very adventurous. Yep. And Chris has done a lot of things. Yep. And our daughter went off to be work in optometry in the Air Force. Okay. And as she's, getting into her new base and she's getting to know her coworkers and making friends, her and her friends had gotten together one day and they just started talking about, there's people from all over in the military, who you are, where you're from, what's your life. And our daughter starts telling about her life growing up with mom and dad. Yeah.
On the air, neck.
Yes. I mean, we were on the mission field. Yeah. We were in Arizona. We lived in Germany for a while. We, did this, that, and the other thing. Chris wrote books. Chris made movies. Chris was the president of a racetrack for a while. I mean, the list goes on and on. Yeah, yep. So she's just talking, and all of a sudden one of the girls just stopped her. And she's like, wait, Dana. You're punking us, right? Like, are you just like seeing how far you can go before we call you out? No. And she had never thought about it before. But yeah, it's been a really amazing ride. But early on when the kids were little, Chris and I actually prayed for that. Because we would get up in our day-to-day life, and he would go to work, and I'd get the kids off to school, and then I'd go to work, and then I'd come home, and I'd go get the kids from school, and then we'd do our homework, and then we'd go to whatever extracurricular activities, and then we'd have dinner, and then we'd go to bed just to start it all over tomorrow. Yeah, we just worked every day just to come back together just for maybe an hour or two, go to bed, and do it all again. And one day we were just waiting for the weekend to come. And Saturday morning came and we woke up. We're sitting there having our coffee. And Chris and I are just like, this is not life. Right. This is not what God wants for us. We're constantly away from each other. We're constantly off doing our own thing. And it just didn't feel right. And we started praying and praying and praying about it. And pretty soon we realized Chris had been doing a bunch of research about Alaska. Like it just started really intriguing him. Yep. And
God's tugging on his heart.
But I didn't know that. And I started looking into Alaska. I'd love to go to exactly. And when we realized we were both getting kind of obsessed with Alaska, we thought, is God doing something here? Yeah. And so it was a lot of prayer. It was years of prayer. Wow. God told us at the time to pull out of every ministry we were involved in. Sounds counterintuitive, but we really felt God leading us in that direction, so we did. Yeah. And then God said, I want you to homeschool your kids. So we pulled our kids out of school. Wisdom. And
especially now.
Yeah, exactly. It's gotten more and more where I'm so glad we did when we did. Yeah. But we started homeschooling, and slowly over the course of about 2 years, he prepared us to go then to the mission field. And we didn't really even realize what he was doing. But again, being obedient to those things, sell your house or quit your job or whatever he wants you to do, that doesn't appear to make sense at the time. Pretty soon we were on our way to Alaska. Yeah. And here's the cool thing. We thought we were going to go up to be part of a mission up by Elam. And we were ready to go. And all of a sudden, boom, the church denomination that was a part of it, they just switched gears. It was no one's fault, but they're like, we're not doing this aspect anymore. We're changing what we're doing.
Minnesota?
Elam, Alaska.
Okay.
Elam, Alaska. That's the far west coast of Alaska.
Cool.
Yeah. Right. Small, remote villages. You can only get there by plane. Anyway. Yeah. That fell through. And we were so discouraged because Chris is like, I've already turned in my time at work. Yeah. It felt like the rug had just been pulled out from underneath us. And we even questioned, God, are we hearing you correctly? Yep. Well, because of his radio experience, somehow just by a fluke, we went to meet with some people, and there happened to be a pastor that was out in Alaska who that mission also had a radio station. Right. And he came running up to Chris. Yeah. Right. He came running up to Chris and he said, you're in radio? And he said, yes. And he said, we need someone to come and manage the radio station. So all those steps God takes you through. Yeah.
Oh, God knew.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, God knows stuff.
And he just puts the weirdest things together, you know. Yeah. So, and I do talk to a lot of people who say, you know, oh gosh, I would love to fill in the blank with ministry, but you know, I have my job and we have our house and and the kids are, you know, their peer group and I just, if God's really got a calling on your heart, if that's really a desire. Let that stuff go.
Well, and there's no wrong or right answer. It's individual.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
I mean, maybe God wants you to stay in that house and raise the kids with their peer group.
But you'll know. You'll know. But the adventure has been worth every minute of it. I mean, it's just been so exciting. And like I said, we now look back and our kids look back and they see the value of the life that God has given them, in that we have broken outside of what everyone says we should be. Yeah. You know what I mean? We've broke that cookie cutter, you know, you grow up, you get a job, you get married, you have kids that go to school, that grow up, that get, you know, we just broke out of that.
And you climb the corporate ladder and stuff. And again, there's nothing wrong with it.
Nothing wrong with it if that's what you're called to do.
But it's Chris's personality too. I mean, I've done a lot of Myers-Briggs. Some people think is kind of pop science, and some people don't think it's a real thing. I think there's a lot to it.
I think there is,
and I know even pastors that give the test to, you know, to their congregation and stuff, just to help us understand who we are better and how to interact with each other. So I found out Chris and I are the same. We're ENFP. Okay. And ENFPs are into adventure.
Yes.
I mean, how else do when I'm 21 years old, I take a one-way bus ticket and what I can carry to Roswell, New Mexico, which I'd never heard of.
Right.
And talk myself into my first radio job.
There you go.
To start the whole adventure, or to drop everything in Lubbock and move up to Harlan.
And I'm not. I'm the polar opposite. In fact, we went to a church planting weekend or whatever to assess whether Chris and I would be church planting material. We were not, which was okay. That's okay. But we did do that Myers-Briggs. Yeah. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs. Okay. Yeah. I get it confused with Briggs and Stratton or something.
Anyway. Chainsaw or
and so we went out there, and you have to sit down with like psychiatrists and psychologists, very professional people that are able to evaluate you.
Because it's like you're going to the Mars, and you're going on a Mars mission.
Yeah,
they want to make sure you're not going to crack in Alaska.
Exactly, because it takes a very certain person. But anyway, we sat down together and all the doctors that were there that weekend, they said, we want to be in with Chris and Emilee. And so they sat in. We had like three doctors in with us, talking about, things, my father's death and, just talking.
Yeah.
And one of them finally said, we all wanted to be here because you two are so polar opposite. We have never seen a couple so opposite
God does that.
Function so perfectly well in that marriage.
That's so good.
And so, again, gift from God. That's a gift from God, because I am not the adventurous type.
Right.
I like order. I like a plan. I like,
ENFPs need that in
security.
Their life.
I like that security.
Yep.
But Chris has taught me to, live outside the box, and I have taught him that there is a box.
Yeah. That's right.
And you can be in the box on occasion, and it's all okay.
Go to the edge of the cliff, but not over.
Right, exactly.
I love it. So, well, I'm looking at the timer on the iPhone. We're at an hour almost exactly.
Nice.
I saw Chris lurking outside the door, so I don't know if you guys are going to lunch or what.
We are going to go to lunch.
Okay, so he's probably
lots of great restaurants here in Harlan, Iowa.
So, we can always do this anytime we want.
I would love to do it again.
But this is great because I think people that are fans of Emilee and Chris and No Apology with Emilee and Chris and Chris and Emilee from the Arizona days and the Michigan days and the Alabama days, maybe they haven't heard some of these stories. I hadn't heard some of these stories, even as an honorary Danielson. So.
There's a lot of stories. There's a lot more where that came from.
Good, Very good. Very good.
Chris actually talked to a lady here in Harlan who used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, and knew us when we got here. So I'm wondering if she even knows you. Probably.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
Oh, they did. We got out of town.
But I'm bummed.
All right. Living life in Harlan, Iowa. Emilee, thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's always fun.
Thanks, boss. I guess I'll see you at work soon.
What do I call you? Minion?
Yes. I don't know. Yes, Minion works. Yeah.
You can call me Overlord.
Overlord. I, for one, welcome our Emilee Danielson Overlords.
There you go.
That's great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, that's episode 6. Jesus is Coming Soon with Mike Shaw. Again, everything at freshroadmedia.com. Check out Emilee's blogs. Check out the, what do we call it? I forgot the word we use, for No Apology with Emilee and Chris. That is our main show. At Fresh Road.
Flagship.
Thank you. That's the word.
Flagship broadcast.
Oh, my goodness. And then Bible Idiots, that's Chris's teaching.
Yes, it's powerful. Yep. Check that out. Yeah, it's really good. Really good. I like having my husband as my pastor.
Yeah.
That's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true.
His sermons are so good.
I know, right?
So, I love it. Yeah. And I love this church, too. Yeah. And love you guys. Love Harlan. Love you. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have another show soon. Jesus is coming back soon. Yeah. So keep looking up.